The sun had barely cleared the jagged line of the Sierras when they came for her. It was not yet 6 in the morning, but the air already carried the dry bite of late summer. A crowd of 23 men miners mostly, with a few storekeepers and 2 boys who should have been milking cows. The tree was old, its bark furrowed deep, its branches heavy enough to hold the weight of a grown person without complaint. Everyone knew it had served this purpose before. Her name was Liara. Her mother had been Dane, taken from a camp near the San Juan years ago during one of the Army's relocation sweeps. Her father was listed in the territorial records as unknown white prospector, though old-timers swore it was a man named Caleb Voss who had wintered with the people one season and left when the snow melted. Liara had her mother's high cheekbones and long black hair, but her eyes were the pale gray-green of high mountain water eyes that marked her as half-blood in a town that tolerated no fractions. They had accused her of poisoning the well at Jensen's homestead. 3 cows had died, bloated and frothing, and the youngest Jensen girl had been sick for 2 days. No one had seen Liara near the place, but whispers traveled faster than facts in Willow Creek. Someone remembered her buying arsenic at the Mercantile 6 weeks earlier for rats, though she had explained it was to treat hides. Someone else claimed to have seen her walking the ridge above the Jensen place at dusk. That was enough. In a town where fear wore the face of righteousness, enough became everything. They dragged her from the small adobe she had built herself on the outskirts of town. She had been kneading dough when the door splintered inward. She did not scream. She simply stood, flour dusting her forearms, and looked at the men with those unsettling eyes. They bound her wrists with coarse hemp and shoved her forward. One of them, a thick-necked miner named Harlan Pike, spat at her feet and muttered, "Half-breed witch." The others nodded as though he had spoken gospel. The walk to the cottonwood took 23 minutes. Liara counted the steps in her head because it kept her breathing steady. She wore the same faded blue calico dress she had worn for 3 summers. The hem was frayed, the elbows patched with scraps of blanket. Her moccasins, the last gift from her mother, were nearly worn through at the soles. She kept her head up. She had learned early that looking down invited the boot. When they reached the tree, the crowd had grown. Women stood at the back now, arms crossed, mouths tight. Children peeked from behind skirts. A preacher from the Methodist circuit, Reverend Tolliver, was there, Bible clutched like a shield. He read no scripture. He only said, "The Lord abhors the mixing of kinds," and stepped aside. They had already thrown the rope. It was new, cream-colored, the kind sold at the Mercantile for 12 cents a coil. The noose had been tied with care. Someone knew the knot. They boosted her onto the back of a gray mule borrowed from the livery. The animal shifted uneasily under her weight. Harlan Pike climbed the ladder they had brought and slipped the loop over her head. The rope smelled of hemp oil and faintly of new rope. It settled against the side of her neck like a cold hand. "Do you have words?" Pike asked, more for the crowd than for her. Liara looked out over the faces. She saw fear dressed as anger, guilt dressed as justice. She saw boys who would remember this day for the rest of their lives and hate themselves quietly in the dark years later. She saw women who would pray extra hard tonight and still sleep badly. "I did not poison the well," she said. Her voice was low but clear. "I have never wished harm on any living thing here." A murmur moved through the crowd, not agreement but discomfort. Someone shouted, "Liar!" A stone the size of an egg sailed past her ear and struck the mule's flank. The animal shied. Liara swayed but did not fall. Pike stepped down from the ladder. "Enough," he said. He slapped the mule's rump. The mule lunged forward. The rope snapped taut. For one terrible second, the world became only pressure and silence. Her toes left the saddle. Her body dropped perhaps 8 inches before the rope caught and jerked her upward. Pain exploded in her throat, white-hot and blinding. Her vision tunneled. She felt her pulse hammer against the constriction, each beat a thunderclap inside her skull. Her bound hands clawed uselessly at the hemp. Her legs kicked once, twice, then slowed as the air starved her limbs. Through the narrowing dark, she heard shouting, not the triumphant roar she expected, but confusion, hooves, a man's voice deep and furious, cutting through the noise like a blade. The crowd parted like water before a stone. He came in at a full gallop on a tall sorrel gelding, dust rising behind him in a red cloud. His hat was gone, blown off somewhere on the trail. His coat was open, revealing a sweat-darkened shirt and the glint of a Colt at his hip. He was not young, late 30s perhaps, but he moved with the coiled certainty of a man who had faced worse things than a lynch mob and lived. The rancher Jace Calder was known in Willow Creek, mostly by reputation. He kept to himself on the high benchland 30 miles north, raising Herefords and cutting hay in summer. He came to town only twice a year for supplies and never stayed long. People said he had fought in the war, though which side no one knew for sure. People said he had buried a wife once. People said a lot of things. Most of it was probably true. He reined the sorrel hard, the horse sliding to a stop in a spray of dirt. Before the animal had fully settled, Jace was out of the saddle, boots hitting ground. He shoved through the men nearest the tree, shoulder first. Harlan Pike stepped forward to block him. "This ain't your concern, Calder," Pike said. Jace did not answer with words. His fist cracked against Pike's jaw with the sound of splitting wood. The miner dropped like a sack of grain. Two others reached for weapons. Jace drew the Colt in one smooth motion and leveled it, not at them, but at the rope. "Move," he said. The crowd froze. Jace stepped beneath the dangling figure. Leora's face was purpled, eyes bulging, lips parted in a silent gasp. Her body still twitched faintly, the last stubborn signals of life. He holstered the Colt, drew the Bowie knife from his belt, and climbed the ladder in 3 strides. He reached up, grasped the rope above the noose, and sawed. The blade was sharp. The hemp parted in 4 quick strokes. The rope gave. Leora dropped. He caught her before she struck the ground. She was lighter than he expected. Her body folded against his chest, limp as a child. He lowered her to the dirt, one arm behind her shoulders, the other cradling her head. Her neck bore a raw red band where the rope had bitten. She was not breathing. He pressed 2 fingers beneath her jaw. A faint pulse fluttered, weak as a moth's wing. He tilted her head back, pinched her nose, and sealed his mouth over hers. He breathed once, hard. Her chest rose. He breathed again. And again. On the 4th breath she coughed a wet, choking sound. Air rushed back into her lungs in a ragged gasp. Her eyes opened, wild and unfocused. She tried to push away, hands scrabbling at his shirt. "Easy," he murmured. "You're safe." The crowd had gone silent. Jace lifted her in his arms as though she weighed nothing. He turned to face them. "She's mine now," he said. The words were quiet, but they carried to the back of the crowd. "Anyone touches her again, they answer to me." He carried her to the sorrel, set her gently across the saddle, then swung up behind her. One arm held her steady against his chest, the other gathered the reins. Behind them the cottonwood stood empty, the severed rope swaying gently in the morning air like a broken promise. The sorrel gelding moved at a deliberate walk down the narrow trail that wound away from Willow Creek. Jace Calder kept the pace slow, almost ceremonial, as though any sudden motion might shatter the fragile thing he carried against his chest. Leora lay slumped in the cradle of his left arm, her head resting in the hollow beneath his collarbone. Her breathing was shallow, rasping, each inhale scraping against the bruised tissue of her throat. The raw band around her neck had already begun to darken into purple and black, the skin split in places where the rope had torn. She trembled not from cold, though the morning air still carried a bite, but from the aftershock of near death. Jace did not speak. Words felt useless in the face of what had just happened. Instead he kept one hand steady on the reins and the other firm across her ribs. The gelding, named Reno, understood the mood of his rider. He stepped carefully over loose shale and avoided the deeper ruts without needing the spur or the rein. Behind them the valley fell away, the cottonwood shrinking to a dark silhouette against the pale sky. No hoofbeats followed. For the first mile, Leora remained limp, eyes half open but unseeing. Then, slowly, awareness returned. She felt the heat of the man's body, the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her. Her hands, still bound at the wrists, rested against his thigh. She tested them, flexing her fingers. Pain flared up her arms' nerves, waking after too long without blood. But the pain was proof she was alive. She tilted her head just enough to see his face. He was looking straight ahead, jaw set, eyes narrowed against the climbing sun. His hair, dark brown shot with early gray, was damp with sweat at the temples. He had not shaved in days. There was something in the set of his mouth, not kindness exactly, but a kind of stubborn refusal to let the world take one more thing. "Why?" she croaked. The words scraped her throat like broken glass. Jace glanced down at her. His eyes were hazel, flecked with gold, and for a moment they held hers without flinching. "Because I was there," he said simply. "And because no one else was going to." She closed her eyes again. That answer was too plain, too honest. It left no room for suspicion or gratitude or anger. She wanted to argue, to tell him he had no right, that she was not a thing to be claimed like a stray calf. But her throat would not form the words, and her body was too heavy to push away. They rode for another hour before he spoke again. "Water," he said, reining Reno to a stop beside a thin trickle that spilled from a crack in the rock face. He dismounted first, careful not to jar her, then reached up and lifted her down as though she were made of porcelain. Her legs buckled the instant her feet touched ground. He caught her under the arms and eased her to a flat stone beside the stream. He knelt, drew his knife, and cut the rope from her wrists. The hemp had bitten deep. Red welts circled her skin like bracelets. She rubbed at them absently, staring at the marks as though they belonged to someone else. Jace dipped his hat into the stream, let the water pool in the crown, and held it to her lips. "Small sips," he said. The water was cold, tasting faintly of moss and granite. She drank until her stomach protested, then leaned back against the rock, exhausted. Jace sat on his heels a few feet away, elbows on knees, watching her without staring. He gave her space, but not so much that she felt abandoned. After a long silence, she asked, "Where are we going?" "My place. High bench above Blacktail Canyon. 30-some miles yet." She looked at him. "You can't keep me." "I'm not keeping you," he said. "I'm keeping them from finishing what they started. After that, you decide." She studied his face. There was no possessiveness in it, no hunger. Only a quiet certainty, the same certainty he had shown when he cut the rope. She did not trust it, not yet, but she had no strength left to fight it either. They rested another 20 minutes. When she nodded that she was ready, he helped her back onto Reno, this time sitting her astride in front of him. She was tall for a woman, nearly 5'9", but he was taller still, and his arms formed a loose cage around her as he gathered the reins. She did not lean into him, but she did not pull away either. The trail climbed steadily now, leaving the valley floor behind. Pinnon and juniper gave way to ponderosa, then to open grassland dotted with aspen, whose leaves had already turned gold. The air grew thinner, sharper. Leora's head began to clear, though the ache in her throat remained a constant companion. She noticed small things, the way Reno's ears flicked at every sound, the faint jingle of the bit, the warmth of Jace's chest against her back when the wind gusted cold. She noticed, too, that he kept glancing at the horizon behind them, scanning for dust. By mid-afternoon they stopped again, this time in a shallow draw where a single cottonwood offered shade. Jace built no fire, too much smoke, but he opened his saddlebags and took out a small tin of jerked venison, a half loaf of cornbread wrapped in oilcloth, and a tin cup. He offered her the food first. She shook her head. "I can't swallow yet." He nodded, tore the cornbread into small pieces anyway, and set them beside her in case she changed her mind. He ate standing, eyes on the back trail. When he finished, he crouched near her again. "Tell me about the well," he said. She looked at him sharply. You think I did it? Didn't say that. Saad, tell me. She drew her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. The blue calico was filthy now, streaked with dirt and sweat. A small tear had opened at the shoulder when they dragged her from the adobe. Arsenic was for hides, she said. Coyotes got into my drying racks last winter, ruined half my stock. I bought what I needed to treat the skin so they wouldn't rot. The mercantile man wrote it down himself. I never went near Jensen's place. Never spoke to them except to trade eggs for salt once. Jace listened without interrupting. They needed someone to blame, she continued. Cows die, girl dies, people get scared. Half-blood makes an easy target. Always has. He nodded once. Jensen's girl is better this morning. Doc Rollins said it was bad water from the spring, not the well. Algae bloom after the dry spell. But the crowd had already decided. Leora gave a short, bitter laugh that ended in a cough. They'll still hate me tomorrow. Maybe. But they'll hate me more now. He said it without pride or regret, just fact. She looked at him, then really looked. Why do you live so far out? Quiet, he answered. And nobody tells me who I can bury or who I can save. She let that sit between them. After a while, she took a small piece of cornbread, moistened it with water, and managed to swallow it. The act felt like a victory. They mounted again as the sun began its long slide toward the peaks. The trail grew steeper, the air colder. Leora began to shiver in earnest. Without a word, Jace unbuckled his coat and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, lined with sheepskin, smelling of wood smoke and horse and the man himself. She pulled it close. By dusk they reached the rim of Blacktail Canyon. Below them, the land dropped away in a series of folded ridges, dark with pine and broken by long meadows. A thin thread of smoke rose from a cluster of buildings, perhaps 2 miles distant log house, barn, corrals, a windmill turning lazily in the evening breeze. Jace pointed with his chin. Home. They descended the switchbacks in silence. When they reached the yard, a black and white collie trotted out barking, then stopped when it recognized the horse. Jace swung down, lifted Leora after him, and steadied her until her legs held. A woman appeared in the doorway of the house, older, gray-haired, apron tied over a calico dress not unlike Leora's. She carried a lantern, even though the last light had not yet faded. Jace? She called. He raised a hand. It's all right, Mara. We've got company. The woman Mara came down the steps slowly, eyes widening as she saw Leora's face, the rope burn, the borrowed coat. She did not ask questions. She simply stepped forward and took Leora's arm with gentle firmness. Come inside, child. Leora let herself be led. The house smelled of bread and cedar and lye soap. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. Mara guided her to a chair near the warmth, then disappeared into the back room and returned with a quilt and a basin of warm water. Jace remained outside, unsaddling Reno, talking low to the horse. He gave them time. Mara knelt, dipped a cloth in the water, and began to clean the dirt from Leora's face. You're safe here. Leora looked toward the open door. Jace was silhouetted against the last rose of sunset, checking the gelding's legs for cuts. I don't know what I am here, Leora whispered. Mara smiled, small and knowing. Outside, Jace finished with the horse, closed the barn door. Supper's in an hour, he said. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow we figure the rest. He stepped back into the night. Leora leaned her head against the chair, the quilt heavy across her lap.